guys, Tiffany here from Tiffany Gordon Cosplay with a tutorial on how to make the Blizzariath small dual blade from the game Monster Hunter Rise. And as always, I have a 2D blueprint to help you make your very own Blizzariath dual blades. It is available on my website, www.tiffanyGordonCosplay.com, or see the link below. And to start off, we're going to be using pink insulation foam, tracing the blade section onto the foam with a Sharpie. Reminder that pink insulation foam can give you an allergic reaction for your skin, so wear gloves. And after the outer part is traced, I traced the inner section as well, for this as a guideline later for cutting. And to cut the insulation foam, I used a combination of a box cutter to make the piece smaller, and then to get into the small cracks, used a hot wire. And when using a hot wire with insulation foam, you will want to wear a respirator and have your windows open because it does create a pretty nasty stink and you don't want to breathe it. So you are warned. Once the base shape is cut out, I then went around the edge of the blade and did a center guideline with a Sharpie. This is going to help me know where to cut the foam on the edges to a point. Next, again, I used a hot wire. This time we're going to use it at a 45 angle, going around the center top guideline as well as the outer line, so that way it'll cut our nice blade sharp part. And I repeated this process for both the top and the bottom half of the blade. And when using a hot wire, you're probably going to have a little bit of waviness, so I like to go back to my sanding bench and use a sanding drum to sand this smooth. Side note, reminder, long sleeves, gloves, you want to vacuum to suck up the insulation foam dust, as well as wearing a dust mask because you do not want to inhale any of the insulation foam debris. Now that all that is done, it's time to do some detailing. And for this, I used my blueprint as a guide to draw on where I was going to add the little texture marks on the blade. I don't know what they're called. And then used a hot wand to carve out where I had put all those marks. Again, respirator. Next, we're going to be using black Worbla to cover the insulation foam. And for this, you're going to want to cut out two sections that are a little bit larger than the blade with scissors, and this is what is going to be sandwiched around the insulation foam. And to activate the black Worbla, you're going to use a heat gun, and you're going to heat up the entire surface until it is nice and loosey-goosey. And while it is still in this state, you will then cover it over the insulation foam on one side, and it should start to drape over like fabric onto a bed. Then going back again with the heat gun, you'll slowly work back and forth with the temperature to push it into all of the crevices. With Worbla, when it gets cold, it will harden. So you will want to kind of balance this with your heat gun where you don't want it too hot, but you don't want it too cold, so you can kind of work in between. And to make things easier, I like to go back and cut off any of the extra Worbla that won't be needed. Now to do the other side, and we're going to repeat the same process of heating up this sheet of Worbla, as well as you want the other sheet of Worbla to be slightly warm, so that way they will bond together. And again, drape it over the exposed side, and then use a heat gun to slowly heat it up and start to fuse the two pieces of Worbla together. Be aware though, a heat gun will melt your insulation foam, so only apply heat to the Worbla section. And once both sides are touching, then you can slowly work back and forth, heating it up, removing any extra Worbla with scissors, and cutting down till you are at the edge of your blade. And to help smooth your seam together, you can use any combinations of tools such as clay sculpting tools or any type of flat surface. And the Worbla, when you apply heat, you can actually push it so it is flat. Be warned, Worbla does get hot, so don't burn your hands. And let's not forget about those detail pieces we added into the insulation foam. For this, you will want to apply the heat gun onto the top section of the blade and And this, you'll see a little bit of the warble start to sag into those sections. You can also use your fingers to press them down as guidelines. And then I continued to do this with some sculpting tools and push into those crevices so that way you could see them. And here's what it looked like so far. For the handle section of this dual blade, I'm using CPVC pipes, and I cut it to the length that I wanted using a jeweler saw. And for the top part of each of the handles that looks kind of like an egg, these I'm going to be cutting tons of circles out of 10mm EVA foam using Koss Tools Circle Cutter. And these pieces are actually going to have the handle inserted into them. So what I had to do was cut the circle that would fit the handle first, and then cut the outer circle around the inner circle. And once I had all of these circles cut, I then applied contact cement glue to both the sides, let them fully dry, and then slowly start to attach each of the pieces together to create the two egg shapes that will go on either side of the handle. And when I had the two sections complete, I then started to carve each of them to shape with a box cutter, until they looked something like this. Next, I went back to my workbench and used a sanding drum to sand all of this smooth. And I didn't want these actually to be smooth in the end. I wanted them to look more like a bone or some type of rock. So I went back and started doing little flat spots all over each of the pieces with the sanding drum. For attaching these EVA foam pieces to the CPVC pipe, I used contact cement glue, applying it to where they would sit, and pushed both of the foam places into place until they were dry. For the strap part on the handle, I used 2mm EVA foam, cutting it in a centimeter worth strip, and then applied contact cement glue to the handle as well as the foam, let them dry, and slowly attach them together. And then figured out where it would fit nicely to our blade section, marked it onto the foam, and then applied contact cement glue to both the Worbla blade and the EVA foam, let them both dry, and then attach the two pieces together. And here's what the piece should look like so far. Next is time for the spikes and the tiny little dot pieces on the blade. And for this, I was a little bit lazy and didn't want to make these pieces out of foam, so I 3D modeled them and printed them in PLA filament. Starting with the oval pieces, attaching them to the blade with contact cement glue. And for the spike pieces, I first traced where they were going to go with a Sharpie onto the EVA foam part, and then with an X-Acto knife, cut out the section and removed the EVA foam there, so that way the piece had a place to sit into the foam. And I attached these again with contact cement glue. The last step was going to be adding foam clay to where the handle and the blade met. And this is a process of applying water where we're going to put it, and then doing the foam clay in the section, and again applying more water with your finger and slowly smoothing them both together. I also did this for around all of the spikes on the handle part. And dun 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 dun! After 24 hours of waiting for your foam clay to dry, you are ready to prime for painting. And as always, we're going to be doing 3 heavy coats of Plasti-Dip to the entire surface of our prop, waiting for that to fully dry, and then we can start airbrush painting. And a big thank you to my sponsor, Createx Colors, for providing all of my airbrush paint for this project. They're an amazing company, go check them out. Anyway, to painting, I did a base coat of black airbrush paint onto the blade section, followed by silver onto the sharp section of the blade. And when that was dry, I then went back with a brown mixture and then sprayed it onto the silver section and dabbed it away with a paper towel. So that way this looked more Monster Hunter grimy kind ofness, as well as doing the same process with black airbrush paint. Once that paint was dry, I then masked off the edge sharp section of the blade with masking tape, and then did another base coat of black. Next, I removed the masking tape along the edge, and we're gonna now do detail painting. Starting off with, again, airbrush paint, but this time with a paintbrush with a gray, greenish, dark mixture color onto all of those detail sections on the blade. And then painting the actual vein edge part with black airbrush paint, as well as all of the little beads around the blade. Now the blade part is done, so I masked it off with some masking tape and paper, and now for the handle. And I started off by painting the spikes with a light brown mixture, followed by black for shadowing. And of course, masked those off once they were dry. Next, I did a base coat of cream onto both of the egg-shaped sections, and then went in with a brown, kind of purpley, orangey mixes on the egg shapes, dabbing them with a paper towel again till they kind of slowly start to look like rocks. And then added a little bit of black for the shadowing around the spikes and the edge where the handle connected to the blade. I then wanted to get a little bit of a light color around all of the edges parts, and to do this I used a paintbrush that was dry and dabbed it in a cream kind of black mixture that mixed back and forth, and just lightly rubbed it against the edge. This really made it feel like an actual rock, and it's really hard to explain it, but it worked. Once all of that was then dry, I then removed all of the paper and masking tape. And then it was time for some more detail painting. For this, I started off with some black going around all of the edges of the handle and the spikes. And for the wrap part of the handle, I did a mixture of blue, black, and white to get this really pretty color, and painted it on by a brush. And the very last step for finishing this dual blade was to seal it, and for this we used Createx Colors UVLS Matte and applied a even coat throughout the blade by a paintbrush. And that, guys, is how I made the small Blizzariath dual blade from Monster Hunter Rise. And I really hope you liked this video. If so, let me know in the comments, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. And a big shout out to all of my Patreon supporters who helped fund this video. And a big thank you to you. And I will see y'all for our next cosplay tutorial. Much love, guys. Mwah!